Thanks for tuning in today. I'm still Dustin, your Alberta condo guru. Previously, I promised this video talking about the three main categories of condominiums in Alberta based on survey plans. Now, we're primarily just going to stick with visualizing residential condominiums, but know that this all applies to mixed-use developments, ones where you might have residential and commercial in the same parcel, working together for a same purpose, but those often tend to get a little bit complex in the way the bylaws and the budgets get set up. So we're just going to stick with the simple discussion of talking about residential condominiums. All right, so here we go. When a developer decides to build a condominium complex so they can sell off the individual homes within it, they have to choose between one of the few approaches. So they could build conventional, Bareland, or multi-stage, which we often refer to as barely blended condominiums or blended condominiums, which are partially conventional and partially Bareland. Please note that phased developments are not going to be discussed in this video, as the implications of how they're regulated by legislation is currently under review, and if it's subject to change, I didn't really want to make a video about that. So let's stick with these three. So the first one there, conventional condominiums. We use this style when we want to compress the amount of sellable real estate in the space in order to get a better return on investment. So from a developer's perspective, if they build an apartment building, they can fit 40 units on it, they can sell each one at a price. But if they were to build only townhomes on it, they might only be able to sell, say, 10. And then if they were to make standalone single home dwellings, they might only be able to build 5 or 6. So the fewer units you have, the more money you have to sell them for in order to make the same return. At the same time, though, keep in mind, conventional condominiums, as you densify, maybe you build up and you start thinking apartment-style buildings. Those buildings can be sold at a much lower rate per unit, but they're often millions of dollars to construct. All right, so in addition to being close together and making and affecting the construction costs, it also changes the cost of savings to the owners in the long run, particularly if they share utility conveyances. So a 50-unit building that might have, say, 3 hot water boilers is not going to require as much cost for maintenance as a set of 50 independent homes that each have 50 hot water tanks, which last 7 to 10 years. So for that reason, you see this cost benefit where condominiums that are conventional style often save money on their mechanical maintenance. In addition, utilities, if they get shared, like the water, the electricity, and the waste, you can deliver them for a lower price point per home. Now, water, you're just going to pay what you're going to pay is through the city. There's no avoiding it. Electricity, you get a bulk rate based upon the size of your building. You're going to qualify as a commercial property. And waste services, those might be something that you can solve instead of 50 people having their own garbage totes. You might have a dumpster or several dumpsters or multiple pickups on one dumpster. These approaches allow you to get bulk rates and get your pricing down so that individually owners aren't paying as much to maintain their home. All right, the second type, a Bareland plan, is used when the space becomes more of a selling feature or construction restrictions don't permit the heights or the number of units that make apartment-style construction feasible. So that's a very oversimplified explanation because you should probably be envisioning a townhouse style if you're thinking this. And the reason why is because we don't like subdividing vertically when we're doing bare land, because bare land is a boundary that's outside the unit. So it's going to include the whole building. Now, we do sometimes split buildings down a party wall, like a townhouse style, and that's where you're most likely going to see it. So bare land condominiums will often either be single or duplexes or even townhouse style, and they'll be constructed in such a way that they touch each other, but then all the rest of the common property is delineated outside of a boundary of maybe their yard. So in conventional, you might have a privacy space like we talked about in video 1, and that privacy space is owned by everyone. It's common property. But in the Bareland style, you might exclusively own the yard that abuts the front of your property or the porch on the back of your property. But then the corporation has a responsibility to take care of it for you, and we'll call that managed property in the bylaws. Again, go back to video 1 if that's not making sense. The tricky thing is, some of these properties are impossible to distinguish. I can walk up to a townhouse complex and have no clue if it's Bareland or if it's conventional. And the way to tell is look at the survey plan. It'll say right on it When you look at that plan, you'll also notice that the boundaries for the units tend to be the shapes of the lots or rectangles, subdividing good chunks of the land. But if I were to actually do conventional, then I'd have lines inside the interior of the building representing the individual units. And that's where the big contrast comes down to. The application of it comes down to the bylaws. How we treat common property or exclusive use common property or managed private property or your private property. These are all delineated through the bylaws. So if this isn't making sense, jump back to video 1, then come back here. All right, when it comes to those boundaries, if there is one thing that you get from today's video, make it this point. Read the bylaws. Before you buy a condo, read the bylaws. Before you plan to modify your yard, read the bylaws. Before you tangle with a neighbor about property rights in the privacy space, read the bylaws. Whether you're a Bareland corporation with managed property or conventional with exclusive use, the individual bylaws will tell you how those items are regulated, who's responsible for maintenance, and in some cases, who's responsible for liability. If you have a Bareland condominium, you want to make sure that your insurance policy covers you for anything that you're responsible for or could cause in your privacy space. So if you've got a hose bib in your privacy space in your yard and it leaks and you are responsible for the maintenance of that hose bib, then the damage that's caused by a busted hose bib, that's going to be your responsibility to cover the cost for. Even if the corporation is responsible to repair, they might just do the repair and charge you back the cost. So make sure you have your insurance in place. Make sure your insurance is right size for your condominium. And if you're in a condominium that has Bareland, make sure you include the stuff on the outside that's yours. Now, each set of bylaws also outlines the duties of the owners to the corporation and the duties of the corporation to the owners, and they're often put in two separate sections. They'll have differences based upon where the area of property it's on is based upon. For instance, in my opinion, the biggest change in 2020 era to the update to the condominium property regulation was making owners responsible for insurable losses that originate from their unit. So this is where you need to think very carefully. Do I own that, or does the corporation and everyone all together own that? If you're talking conventional, then you own what's inside your unit. You have to worry about any insurable loss that could originate from your unit. This could include a septic backup or a water line break. This could include a fire originating from your unit. If it starts within your unit, if the source of the loss is within your unit, make sure you have coverage for it. Now, if your unit includes outside property, you might need to worry about hail coverage. You might need to worry about overland flow, as in flooding coverage. So make sure you, when you shop for insurance, that they know what you need coverage for. And if you don't know, speak to your manager or speak to the insurance representative and have them look at your bylaws and help you understand and interpret it. Often, the rights and responsibilities in the bylaws will overrule a simplified interpretation of what you do or don't own. So don't just go off the survey plan. That's a good point to help you start and find out, do I have conventional or do I have Bareland? But the bylaws are going to have a lot to say about who takes care of what. And that's why you really need to read the bylaws. All right. Now, we haven't talked about that third type at all, so we're going to take care of that now. When it comes to funding the construction of a condominium, developers often don't have millions of dollars in cash laying around to pay for the build, but depend upon pre-selling units that they then build to fund the project. There are rules in the construction of buildings when developers can access some or all of those funds, which are held in trust while the building is being built. Or when the developer holding empty units has to pay condo fees. That's also regulated. A workaround that some developers have been using is called the approach of redivision. And so what I want you to envision, and I'm using this example here, is just a bare land development. They've decided they want to build 5 buildings on this property. So they take this subdivision plan and they chop it up into 5 lots. And those lots, we're not going to call lots anymore because lots are divisions of blocks, which are divisions of conventional plans, like subdivision plans. But once we get to a condominium plan, we don't use lots and we don't use blocks. We use units. So we're going to take this big chunk of land and we're going to chop it up into unit 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. And that's going to represent the 5 places we're going to build buildings in the future. Then we're going to take one of those units and we're going to divide it again. So it's another condominium plan, subdividing unit 1. So unit 1 gets deleted and gets replaced with units 6 to, say, 51, giving me 45 individual units to sell. Now, the reason it starts at 6 is because this condominium already has units 2, 3, 4, 5, which are representing the other buildings that we're not even trying to build yet. The first building gets built. It gets occupied, the funds are released to the developer, who then decides, hey, that made us enough money, let's subdivide the next unit and start building that one. And so now they redivide that next section of the plan so they can build building number 2. One of the best benefits we get from doing it this way is now we can finance these massive condominium corporations, which have these strong spending power and huge leverage and maintenance costs, but we can build them over the course of several years, something that a developer often couldn't afford to do unless they had the funds coming in. So by doing it this way, we get to have more empowered condominiums. One of the drawbacks, though, is it's a little hard to make up for the inflexibility of having pre-decided where we're going to put the buildings. So if the first building I build it, I make 45 units and I sell it, and I have a tough time selling it because the rest of the development around us happens to be high-end or larger condominiums. Now I want to revise my plans for the next building. I don't want as small of units. I want to make bigger units, but I want to make fewer of them. When that happens, I might need to change the unit factor calculation for the corporation. But I've already assigned unit factors to the first building when I subdivided it. So there might be a recalculation that's required by a surveyor in order to redo the math. And this is why you see multiple iterations of some survey plans when we get to this style. Sometimes what they pre-plan is exactly what they do it all the way through for the next several years. And where they start and where they end is exactly where it was supposed to be. When that happens, the community expands, costs increase, but so do the number of units paying for these costs. It takes years for this corporation to fully turn over from a property the developer owns to the owners that own it. And that's why this third type is often thought as a transitional type. Now, just keep in mind, gonna say it one last time, as unique as condominiums are, they have one very common thread. Read the bylaws. Next time, we're going to we're going to delve into how unit factors and unit owners affect voting and resolutions. So this is when you want to call a special meeting. This is when you change your bylaws, change your standard insurable unit description. How many people do you need to vote, and how many unit factors do you need represented in order to get something done by the larger group of ownership? So yes, please, if you're interested, please do tune in next time. So please subscribe so you get that notification, and I will see you next time.